Hi, my name is Gerry Hebert, and I'm the Senior Director of Voting Rights and Redistricting at the Campaign Legal Center, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her influence on my career and the career of so many others, and in particular two cases that I was involved in that were decided by the Supreme Court, and Justice Ginsburg played a big role. The first is to say that in 47 years of being a civil rights lawyer, I was so thrilled when Justice Ginsburg was first nominated and then confirmed to be on the Supreme Court. The second, after Thurgood Marshall, to be a civil rights lawyer to take a seat on the Supreme Court. And one of the troubling things about her passing for me is that it will be the first time in over 5 decades that we have not had a civil rights lawyer as a member of the Supreme Court. Because I think that perspective, the sensitivity, the knowledge of representing the downtrodden and the oppressed is such a valuable commodity for a Supreme Court justice. The two cases that I mentioned, Shelby County versus Holder, was a case that challenged the constitutionality of a provision of the Voting Rights Act, a provision that was the most effective provision of the Voting Rights Act, and one that, as we've seen since Shelby County was decided in 2013, still desperately needed because of the ongoing discrimination in voting that continues to be imposed on victims of voting discrimination. Justice Ginsburg's participation in the oral argument and ultimately her dissent from the Supreme Court's 5-4 decision striking down the preclearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act, nullifying them. She made that famous quote about you don't really throw away your umbrella because you're not getting wet in a rainstorm. And that was kind of the way that she always kind of went to the heart of the matter and was able to identify with specificity exactly what the case was all about. Because the fact is that the preclearance provisions really stopped a lot of rain of discrimination from falling on the heads and shoulders of people who had been victimized by voting discrimination. The other case that went up to the Supreme Court was a case that I was involved in challenging the photo ID law in Texas, which eventually was struck down. And we had hit a roadblock in that case in the Fifth Circuit, where we had won the case. We had proven that the photo ID law was discriminatory in Texas, and the Fifth Circuit had actually upheld our decision. But then there was a petition for the full court to hear it in the Fifth Circuit. And the Fifth Circuit sat on that case with undue delay, in our opinion. And after a certain time had passed, we made the decision to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. And it was, a risky proposition, because anytime you take a voting rights case to the Supreme Court of the United States, especially in the last few decades, it's a risky proposition because the justices have not been very good in protecting voters, not only under the Voting Rights Act, but in voting generally. So it was questionable about whether that strategy made sense, but we felt the Fifth Circuit was sitting on the case, and ultimately the Supreme Court, and I believe that in all my heart that Justice Ginsburg played a role in this, the Supreme Court set a deadline for the Fifth Circuit to actually decide whether to hear the case as a full court, and if so, a deadline by which to decide it. And that order was incredibly important for us ultimately being successful in the litigation. And I have no doubt, as I sit here today and look back on that case, which is still ongoing actually after 7 or 8 years, that Justice Ginsburg brought to that decision and that order of the Supreme Court a knowledge of what it's like to represent victims of discrimination facing potentially hostile judges who were unwilling to decide the case and felt that it was in the best interest to sit on the case, and she knew the strategy that was being employed. And so that's the kind of justice that I came to admire so much, and her legacy lives on. And as long as I'm able to practice law, I will try to abide by the example that she set, which is to never give up, seek justice, advocate for equality. And I'm so grateful for her legacy on the Supreme Court.